In this episode of Miniature Landscape Hobbies, we're going to look at how to paint infantry in 15mm. Painting infantry in 15mm, which is about 1/100th scale, is a unique challenge that wargamers who play Flames of War, Team Yankee, or other similar games are faced with. And for a lot of hobbyists, it's often seen, at first, as a pretty daunting prospect. When you're trying to take something like this and make it look like this, the task can be quite intimidating. Especially when you remember that the figure that you're working on is smaller than this. It's no wonder then that you hear the odd hobbyist commit to working with vehicles only. But I think any of these people eventually realize that they're missing out, both as artists and gamers, because without infantry, you really are only playing half the game. The purpose of this video is to show you my method for painting infantry. Now, it's not the only way to paint infantry, it's only a way to paint infantry, but it happens to be the style I use. If it can help you up your painting game or help you overcome your fear of painting 15mm miniatures, then I've succeeded. So let's get to it. I'm going to demonstrate on these Fallschirmjäger German infantry by Battlefront miniatures. They're used for Flames of War. The first thing I do is clean them up and cut them off the sprue. Then, taking out some hot glue, I glue them down to some lengths of wood that I have, specifically for undercoating and handling the models. Then, taking out my airbrush, I load it with some Vallejo black spray primer, and I spray the models down with a fairly good coat to cover them completely. When you're doing infantry, there's a lot of tricky angles to do, so I always make sure that I take a careful approach and I turn the models this way and that, making sure I get the primer into all the nooks and crannies. Now I load up the airbrush with some sand yellow, and I go ahead and spray that lightly on the tops of the models, on their jackets, anywhere that's going to be getting a camouflage pattern. I try to keep the coat fairly light so the dark areas show through in the recesses of the model. Then, following this, I go ahead and get out some dark sand Vallejo paint, and taking a dry brush, lightly dry brush it on over the section where I had already applied the sand yellow. Getting out my German camouflage bright green, I take a very fine brush and I go in and paint jagged patches over the cloth to start my camouflage. I then follow up by painting on some patches of mud brown, and while I'm at it, I paint some of the pouches with the mud brown as well as the rifle stocks. Deciding the brown tones need a highlight, I pour out some deck tan, and grabbing a really fine brush, go in and pick out the details around the edges and the high points on the pouches. And then I move on and do the same on the rifle stocks. Once the deck tan is dried, I get out some Army Painter soft tone and go over the browns. This just helps unify the colors a little bit and it settles into the depths. I do the same with the rifle stocks. In the next step, I get out a whole bunch of different colors of gray. I paint German gray on the webbing and the boots. I paint Fieldgrey on the pants, and I paint a dark gray on the guns. With the clothing well in hand, I decide to start on the skin tones. So as always, I start by painting any of the flesh areas with Hull Red. While that's drying, I get out some blue-gray and go ahead and apply a highlight to the weapons. I focus mainly just on the tops, where the sun might be glinting off the metal. Now I go back to the skin tones, and using light flesh, I painted on the raised areas of the skin, mainly the nose, the cheeks along the jawline, the knuckles, and the backs of the hands. To introduce depth to the flesh tones and to add a little bit of realism, I get Army Painter Flesh Wash and I go ahead and dab it onto any of the skin tones I had already painted. Now it's time to prepare for shading, so since I'm going to use enamels, I load up my airbrush with some satin varnish and I go ahead and spray 2 coats on the models. This will not only seal in the paintwork I've done so far and protect it, but it'll also provide a layer over which the enamels can flow when I start applying them as a wash. Once the enamel has had about an hour to dry, I go ahead and get out my enamel wash. In this case, I use dark wash for NATO green vehicles, and thinning it out quite a bit with probably about a 1-to-1 mix of white spirits, I go ahead and, using a paintbrush, dab it into the cracks and the corners, the creases in the clothing, anywhere that requires some depth. I let the capillary action carry the enamel into place. That completes the process for painting the model. I think you'll agree that the result looks great. From here you need to move on to do the bases. I'll attach a link for how to base 15mm models above. It's not a hard technique, but it involves some specific skills, and it deserves a video of its own. I hope this has given you some ideas for how to paint your own infantry. Painting troops is not easy, I admit that, but the only way you're going to improve your skills is if you dive in. Plus, painting models is about challenging yourself and increasing your skills step by step. So, give it a try. You'll surprise yourself at the results you can achieve. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is supported entirely by its viewers. Please consider supporting me by checking out my Patreon page, or head over to my Etsy store, where you can purchase many of the projects I feature in my videos. Until May 1st, 2021, my viewers can earn a 20% discount. All you have to do is follow the link in the description. Please stay tuned for new content twice weekly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is your source for model building, miniature painting, and diorama content. If you've not yet subscribed, make sure you do, and press the bell button to receive immediate notifications so you do not miss out. Thanks for watching, and until next time, remember to keep building life in miniature.